orbital.
The chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Echo Delta nominal.
Flight down, SC off.
Bring in, SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, you know the drill. Wherever you're watching from, is the bar jumping? Whew, the bar's jumping. Good thing. Give me some 5x5s in chat. Let me know if you can see and hear me. John Galloway with NASA Spaceflight. Here, time for another Intrepid Museum Virtual Astronomy Live in partnership with NASA Spaceflight, in partnership with me, everywhere. It's everything. It's cool. Just let me know if you can hear me. I see some 5x5s on Twitch. I see some 5x5s in this chat. I have more windows that I can shake a stick at, and believe me, I can shake a stick. Let's see here. It looks like everything's working correctly. So we have a fantastic show to do today. A little bit of a divergence from our normal NSF Live. We've been doing these shows once a month in partnership with Intrepid Museum. It used to be Virtual Astronomy Live. Or actually, it used to be Astronomy Night at the museum, and I would actually go to the museum and we would live stream special guests talking on the stage long ago and far away. That was a monthly thing we used to do. And then the world changed and COVID hit and we went virtual, and we continued doing the shows. We just called it Virtual Astronomy Live. So while we're not going to be doing much astronomy tonight, that's next month when we talk about James Webb with James Webb scientists, we are going to be talking about the 10th anniversary of decommissioning the Space Shuttle program. What does that mean? It's like, wait, what? What does that even mean? The program was over. That's the end, right? Not at all. They didn't just stack up the space shuttles in a, I don't know, graveyard somewhere in Utah, Arizona, where's that graveyard at? Wherever it is. They actually made sure that the shuttles, the historical artifacts that they are, ended up at homes where people could continue to use them to be inspired and educated and learn about what went on and just be awe-inspired at the battle damage on the ones that went all the way to orbit. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Got a special guest from NASA, a person who was in charge, the person who was in charge of actually getting the space shuttles out to their final home. Stephanie Stilson will be talking with us. She was actually a flow director for Discovery. Did I put a question mark at the end of that? She was a flow director for the actual active shuttle launches, like how they moved them around and processed them in between launches. And then after the program ended, she was in charge of getting them to their final homes. How do you transport a shuttle? I mean, it's sort of like this, right? You got the carrier aircraft, you got the shuttle, you got the yellow thingy that lifted it up in a crane and stuff. So that's the show for today. Again, if you're just joining us, it is a special Virtual Astronomy Live. It's Intrepid Museum. It's NASA Spaceflight as well. This is our NASA Spaceflight live show, NSF Live for this week. But we're going to start off the show with a very special guest that you've seen on the streams before. I'm pretty sure the NSF people have seen him before. Please welcome to the stream, Mr. Eric Boehm. Eric, how you doing today?
Hey, John, good to see you again. And I want to apologize to all your viewers that were expecting Alicia again. I'm sorry. We gave her a day off finally, and so you're stuck with me.
I saw people in chat saying like, oh, Virtual Astronomy Live, is Alicia going to be on? And I was like, oh, it's Eric.
But those people are signing off now, so.
The viewership numbers just...
Yeah.
Eric is the curator of aviation. Is that the whole title these days, or did you add some stuff to it? Curator of aviation at Intrepid Museum, which includes not only the orbiter Enterprise that's on the aircraft carrier, but all the other aviation exhibits, right?
Right.
Excellent.
And we have a new airplane we just rolled out. Well, not new. It's a 1960s vintage airplane, a fighter jet that actually served on Intrepid.
Really?
Back in 61, and we just finished the repaint and rolled it out, and it's out on the line now. It's called an F4d Sky Ray, so if anybody wants to visit Intrepid, you'll see a new airplane on the deck.
The pancake-looking one, right? It looks like almost like a pancake.
It looks like a manta ray.
Yeah.
Wing. It's beautiful.
All right. Well, let's talk about shuttles moving around, shall we?
Yeah, please. 10 years.
Yeah. Let's see. There's some pictures.
Yeah, so I love this shot. This is one of my favorite shots of Enterprise coming out of Udvar-Hazy. Discovery has arrived, and they're about to do this swap.
Right. And
they did this nose-to-nose kind of photo op, and there must be a million shots of this online because everybody there took so many shots, and it's just it's really an iconic image. These two orbiters really never met, until that. But it was just great to see the prototype next to one that had so many missions. coming nose to nose, and just everybody was comparing.
Really?
Look at this. They're identical in size and shape, but the surface details are very, very different. So a lot of fun.
It was almost like the old switcheroo. Like they had Enterprise at Udvarhazy, right? And then they pulled the old switcheroo. Like, did they put up a curtain? And then all of a sudden, when they brought the curtain back down, it's a different shuttle. Like, what happened? It got dirty.
Yeah, well, they had to use the same SCA. So, and the guest you have on the main show, Stephanie Stilson, your guests are going to love her. I met her when we were going through this process, and I was just struck with how professional and how perfect she does stuff, and her team does everything perfectly. And in fact, I've used some of her comments in another exhibit before, because she's just a brilliant leader. She's still with NASA, as you'll find out more about her when she comes on. I'm not going to toot her horn too hard because she'll get embarrassed, but to meet up with these people who really knew what they were doing and made this whole process seem easy.
Yeah.
And it was not easy.
I guess that's something I hadn't thought of. Like, if you're flying one shuttle into the museum where it's going to live going forward, you also have the carrier aircraft there, and then did they just load up the other shuttle on top of the SCA and ship it off to where it was going?
Exactly. That's what they did in DC, where there's a little bit of a hiccup down there because weather moved in. They had finally mounted Enterprise on the SCA, and they were getting ready to go. And I remember I was at a museum conference, and where there was one scheduled, and the airplane, and Stephanie would know better, it was supposed to be that Tuesday. They were going to be arriving in JFK, and I had to fly out on Thursday. And then there was this weather hold, and I'm like, oh no, I am going to miss the JFK arrival.
Jeez. And
sure as heck I did. It didn't come until that Friday. But while it was sitting on the ramp at Dulles, this rainstorm came in. They quick put little temporary covers on the vents. There's the vents in the payload bay.
Yeah.
And Enterprise does not have the doors that close. The mechanism is not there. These vents are always open. And it's still filled with some water. They had to pump some water out, but it still made the flight with some water on board.
Really?
And, yeah, we had to pump out some water at final arrival at Intrepid.
No kidding. That's like the payload that Enterprise carried. Like the other shuttles are like, I carried Hubble, I carried all these missions, and Enterprise is like, I carried some water from
rainwater.
Washington to New York.
Real ballast back in the day when it was doing its glide test. But yeah, it carried some water from DC to New York, a little bit.
Was it like import stuff or anything? Is they had to like test the water to make sure you weren't contaminating the New York water? I don't know how that goes, but anyways, let's see what else we have here, because you sent me quite a few pictures. I
sent you a few photos of my personal photos when this process was going on.
This looks like a personal photo, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's me. It's all about me today, because Stephanie's going to steal my limelight here in a minute. But this is the hangar, the big hangar at JFK. And so after it landed, we taxied it right in so it'd be undercover, because there was a lot of process yet to go. We still had to demate it. We still had to tow it across JFK over to where the water is adjacent to the water where the barge would be. Yeah. And then crane it again. So there was a lot to go on. And this was just kind of like, it's here. Let's take a deep breath. And so they moved it into the hangar, and we walked around. We toured the inside of the SCA. If you haven't been inside the SCA, it's just fascinating. I'm an aircraft structures guy. So the first thing I wanted to find is the structural modifications needed, for where the bipod was and where for the F mounts were, where they came into the fuselage. So fascinating for me, but I'm just an airplane structures geek. So.
What's inside of it? Are there like seats?
There's a few seats forward. There's a few seats forward for taking folks who are coming along for a ride. But for the most part, it's just completely empty airplane. And that's why I think it's got great performance, and the thing you're carrying has its own lifting wings. So I talked to the pilots, and there's no great problems with flying this combined vehicle. So thrust to weight ratio, the 747 had plenty of power.
Yeah, I'm surprised there was a hangar that it fit into. I guess I had never really thought about that. Like, the shuttle on top has a tail on top of the shuttle, but how much taller is that than the normal tail on a 747?
Exactly.
Where hangars can fit in.
It all fit. Yeah. That may be, and Stephanie may know this for sure, I think that might have been the wash rack there at JFK, where you could bring in, I think you could fit 2 big airliners in there and wash them in there. I think that's what that was.
No kidding. So again, this was 10 years ago. That's one of the reasons we're doing the show, is because it's the 10th anniversary of this move where the shuttle sort of left their launch facilities or wherever they ended up and ended up at the museums, right?
Exactly. And it's we really had to get it turned because they needed the SCA for, I think, the final delivery to California that was coming up.
Right.
And they were like, I mean, these things were coming out and they were on a time schedule and things had to snap.
Yep.
Had to happen. And we had that delay at Dulles, so they had to catch up.
All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Again, y'all, we're talking today about transporting shuttles around after the program ended. We've got a special guest from NASA coming up in less than 20 minutes now. Stephanie Stilson, flow director for Discovery and all sorts of other things there in between there and that and the other. She's going to be joining us in less than 20 minutes. For now, we're talking with Eric Boehm, the aviation curator for Intrepid Museum, if you're just joining us so you know what's going on. And these are his personal photos as they were moving Enterprise from, well, where it was to where it needed to be. This is the right way to say it, right?
Right. And I had 1,000 photos. I had to pare them down to just a half a dozen for you. Oh, this is another one of my favorite shots. So my wife is a professional photographer. She's retired now, and but she was actually hired to kind of ride along, and we climbed onto one of the Circle Line boats. And if you ever come to New York City, you have to do this. This is kind of like one of those iconic New York City touristy things to do. They're just 2 piers away, just to the south of Intrepid. So you could do both of us on the same day. But the Circle Line boats have been there for, I mean, I took it when I was a little kid. They go around Manhattan on sightseeing tours. But Circle Line provided a boat to Intrepid to kind of follow the barge up the final length up the Hudson River. And right here, and your visitors will recognize this, the at that time still unfinished new World Trade Center, you know, and this was the replacement. This is One World Trade, and we actually stopped. Everything stopped. The tugboat stopped.
Barge and everything just stopped.
Everything stopped. All the boats stopped, and we just paused for a moment. And we do this. We've done this a couple times because we've actually taken Intrepid in and out back in 06 and 08 for restorations work on the ship. We were closed for those 2 years, but this is what we do, and we pay our respects coming up Manhattan, right in front of the World Trade Center. So that's what that was in that photo.
Gotcha.
It was pretty. It's always kind of, you know, an emotional thing for us New Yorkers.
Yep. Makes sense. So let's see here. Here we've got, you were talking about your wife, and I think this is her, right?
That is her.
There you go.
So, we got somebody else to take up here. Look how young we look there, you know, 10 years ago.
Only 10 years ago.
This blows my mind. 10 years. I can't believe it. The pandemic kind of screwed up some of that because the pandemic seemed like it just took away a piece of life, you know?
Yep.
And it's almost like that couple of years just didn't happen. And so when you're coming up with these anniversaries, I'm like, 10 years, it doesn't feel like 10 years because of that stupid pandemic. It doesn't feel like 10 years.
Yep.
But here, this is us. We're actually coming very close to Intrepid at this point, and they've got to kind of like do-si-do the barge around and get it in the right position. Everything is moving very, very slowly and cautiously. Stephanie was making sure of that, and her crew was just watching everything like a hawk and get it in the right place so that they can hook up all that craning mechanism, which is a real process. And you can look at the clouds behind us. We were a little concerned, I recall, because it was my wife loved the sky. For photographers, you don't want that brilliant, bright sunshine kind of thing.
More diffuse, right?
Yeah, it blows out all your photos and it's hard to deal with and you need filters and things. But when you have this naturally diffused sunshine with these wonderful clouds, meanwhile, the rest of them are like, I hope it don't rain again. I hope the wind doesn't pick up because there's wind limits. And Stephanie could talk about that. I don't remember what they were, but when you have something on a crane, there's wind limits. And if the wind picks up, that crane ain't moving, and what do you do now? So
you just sit there and wait. I want to point something out really quickly. Let's see how much we can enhance here. For everyone that thinks that SpaceX pioneered the use of some types of equipment, check this out. There's lifts. Not only is there a barge moving a spacecraft related thing, there's all sorts of other shuttle barge related stuff, but there are lifts like you see all over Starbase with the SpaceX stuff on the barge there. Nothing new to use stuff like that. I wonder if those are from United Rentals. But
they probably are.
They probably are.
We use them a lot. And those particular lifts we're going to do. There's 4 attachment points.
Yep.
The gangtree comes down and there's 4 attachment points on the main fuselage. And so the crews were ready. The
Ready to
lifts
go.
were on the barge. They had to be on the barge. All that stuff had to be loaded on with the vehicle.
Well, that's where you get into a situation where you get to the destination, but then you need a crane to pick the lift onto the barge so that you can reach the spot where you need to put the bolt in, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of planning went into it, and that's what we're going to hear about when we talk to Stephanie.
The planning blows my mind. I hope you have enough time if she gets into the real minutia of the planning, because and they were dotting I's and crossing T's like crazy. It was remarkable. I sat in on a lot of meetings with them, and just the professionalism, the thoroughness, no stone unturned, not any kind of what might happen was reviewed, and plan B, C, D, E, F, G. They had plans for everything. Nothing could happen that they weren't ready for. It was amazing. You've
got the professionalism of the NASA team, and then you've got this nerd in front of the shuttle on the deck of the
the nerd. Once again, all about me. It's me.
They're your photos. We have Stephanie's photos coming up here, but these are your photos. And
I didn't want to duplicate anything. That so this is great. Enterprise is on the deck, and there's this collective sigh of relief from everybody there. There was another photo I had of Stephanie and I and one of her crew persons together, and I thought you're getting too many pictures of me, so I didn't give you that. But this was just a wonderful thing. Now, there's a little funny story here. Like I mentioned, my wife is a professional photographer. She was there I think she had to take 1,000 photos that day.
I believe it.
She's standing next to the president of the museum, Susan Marinoff-Zausner, who is still the president of our museum and just the most wonderful person in the world to ever work for her. I'm not just saying that either. But they were kind of together, and Enterprise was coming down. Remember I said it got a little rainwater in it?
Oh, no.
So there is actually a couple places where there's drain holes.
Right.
Not to fly in space. So there was actually drain holes kind of built in. And as the thing settled, and as soon as it touched the deck, the Intrepid is slightly listing one. You wouldn't notice it if you're walking on the deck. You're not going to notice any kind of list. Right. Very, very slight, but it helps with rainwater to run off the deck, so we don't get any puddling on the deck. And so it's tilted a little bit, and so I guess the vehicle kind of felt that, and this drain hole started leaking, and my wife looked at Susan and said, "Oh, look, she's marking her territory." And she must be home, and so I give my wife the credit for that little joke, and she's probably going to kill me if she finds out I mentioned this.
The shuttle marking its territory.
And it hasn't moved since, and it's just a wonderful thing.
Real quick,
I sent you one more photo.
I do have one more, but I got a quick question. Are these the temporary plugs you talked about?
Those are there.
The museum.
Good show.
Right there, right?
Now those didn't make the flight. They're just they're kind of like a. They ran to Home Depot, and they got like this insulation board, so it's like foam.
Yep.
They were NASA people are ingenious. They came up with this elastic cord kind of thing. Looped an elastic cord and a stick, and so you put the stick in the hole and turn it, and then you let it snap on, and the elastic cord held it on there, and that's what they did once it started raining. Some water got in there, of course, but they got it plugged. And then they brought them with them in case we had any kind of problems up here in New York. And as soon as the thing was off the 747, they were up there on those man lifts,
plugging those holes,
putting those plugs back on. So we weren't going to get any more water, but great fun. And believe it or not, I saved every one of those. Those are in our collection storage.
Really?
Hey, it's an artifact.
You have the plugs that they use to keep the water out while transporting it. No kidding.
Plugs over the vent holes on the payload bay
from Home Depot. Or Lowe's or something like that, right?
Elastic cords in the stick. I mean, there's NASA Ingenuity exhibit has to happen, and one of these will be on display someday. So
nice.
I saved them.
We've got the last photo here because it's about 10 minutes before we have our special guest from NASA. Let me bring this one up because a lot of people were involved with making this happen.
Oh, I put a couple pictures of me in there. I had really a 0.1% to do with this whole move. And all those people that is Intrepid staff, and there's Susan Marinoff-Zausner on the far left there that you see to the nose, and that's our staff, and most of those people are still with us, as far as still employees with us, and every one of those people had something to do with the success of that vehicle being there. Not a single person from Susan and everybody there, even the security guards that are in there. There's security guards in there, our operations people, our exhibits people, the educators are in there. marketing people. I could see them. I could see our finance person. I see them all in
Zoom
there.
in and you can like mark some people.
Yeah, you can zoom in and I can name every one of them.
It's like, all right, starting from left to right, we got Susan.
But love this family photo. And if you ever in any of our offices, I think Susan has this in her office. I have this in my office. Most of the people have this photo in their office because it epitomizes what Intrepid means to all of us, which is team. The team Intrepid. And we've been through a lot. We've been through closing up to rebuild our pier. We've been through storms and we've been through power outages and all sorts of, Sullenberger. Actually, I mean, look at where you can see the Hudson River.
Oh, yeah.
That's where Sullenberger landed. Okay.
Like right over not right here, but that's the Hudson River
just about where you circled it, where he came to rest. Really? And then he floated right past the fantail of Intrepid.
No kidding.
While we were getting people off on the Circle Line boats, by the way.
Right.
But the things that this team has been through, and you can't throw anything at this team that they can't overcome. So I love all these people, love them all, and it's family. Excellent.
And I want to do this because it looks like we get some detail on this setup here. It's literally like the insulation, like that radiant barrier insulation, and you can see the elastic cord.
Yeah, you can see the elastic cord with a knot in it.
With a knot in it, yeah.
But you can install it from outside by sticking the stick in, turning it,
and then pop,
snapping it shut.
Just letting it go. Nice.
Brilliant.
No kidding.
That might be a Stephanie thing. Yeah, you might want to ask her about that. Who thought of that up? Yeah.
All right. Well, we still have a couple minutes here. Let's see what we're doing. This is actually near where the shuttle still is today. Where the orbiter still is today.
The orbiter is on that very spot.
It's right there, right?
It has not moved. Now, what we did was when it transported down from JFK, we got as far as Jersey City, and what we did is there's actually a simulated bipod already installed. You notice how nose high it is and it's level.
Ah, yes.
So there's already a simulated bipod that we installed in Jersey City, and also some pads attached to the struts on the main gear, because the tires don't touch the deck. None of the tires touch the deck.
Right.
They look like they don't, and it holds it level. And we also put these strut extensions on it. So when it's sat, you can see how high it is. We wanted the belly to be at least 10 feet.
Yep.
So that visitors can get underneath, because it's on the flight deck of the Intrepid. It's only 90 feet wide.
Yeah, you don't want to mark it all
around
off.
it. If you're going to walk around it, there's no place for the public to go. So it's 10 feet. And you've been in there. You've been in that room. So it's 10 feet and you can't touch the belly.
Exactly.
You get your occasional teenager who makes a running jump and tries to touch
it. You don't want people like either you have to close the underside off if you just reach up and scratch it or something, or you have to make it high enough that normal people can't reach up and touch it, right?
And we do exhibits under there. When I did the Hubble exhibit, the Hubble 25th anniversary exhibit years ago, it was right underneath the belly of the orbiter. It was pretty cool. We keep doing things. We got another exhibit coming in October. Women of the Space Shuttle program.
Cool.
All the women that flew on Shuttle. So
I've done streams from under there. So when we did Astronomy Night, my camera position was underneath the sort of the tail and the body flap and the big arrow cone at the back.
And we kept the arrow cone on.
Yeah,
we kept it on.
That's where I would set up my camera, and I'd look up, and I'm like, oh, I'm underneath the space shuttle. That's cool. And then we'd do the little astronomy show. Yeah.
But the first thing we had to do once we got it undercover was pump out that extra water and do a corrosion inhibitor application to every square inch of the inside. And we did get every square inch because we had a small person on staff who actually, you can get in the wing. You take the bulkhead off inside the landing gear. There's a panel, and a small person can actually go almost out to the wingtip.
No kidding.
Sprayed the entire, and all the way up into the tip of the tail cone. And then the crew module is actually a separate structure, kind of like an egg inside a clam.
Yeah.
And we were able to run extension nozzles up the sides, and we just blasted it with this corrosion inhibitor. So every square inch of the interior of this thing has corrosion inhibitor applied.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, it's right there on the water. It's not too far to the salt. I guess the Hudson River's not salt water, but there's salt water out there.
It is. It doesn't get brackish until you can go 5 more miles upstream, and it's still brackish. It's very kidding. Yeah, that's a salty river. Yeah.
All right. Well, here is the deal, Eric. I think we've run out of time here for our pre-show sort of segment. But again, y'all, Eric Boehm, curator of aviation at Intrepid Museum, heavily involved with getting Enterprise there and actually up on the deck and displaying it and all its artifacts after the fact. Eric, thank you so much for hanging out with us while we get ready for the big event here.
My pleasure, and I look forward to doing this again. And Alicia will probably be here next time.
All right. Well, for everyone who was hoping that it was Alicia and got Eric instead, maybe next show we'll have Alicia back.
Hey, I wore my Hawaiian shirt for
and
it.
everything. You need a shuttle shirt. You need like a Hawaiian shirt that has shuttles on it. I know someone. I should
send me the link. I'll buy
send
it.
you an email.
Yes, please.
All right, Eric, I'm going to hop over and let's see if we can't get our regular or our guests on for the main part. But thank you so much again for sharing some of the photos there and stories about Intrepid.
Okay, enjoy Stephanie. She's so smart. Ask questions.
Excellent. We will.
Got it.
All right, folks, that was Eric. It is now time for me to see if we can't hop over and get our special guest. Again, that's what we sort of do with the shows. Like, I'm open to feedback on that. If y'all think, like, oh, should we do the pre-show? Should we just start with the special guest? Like, let me know in chat real quick. I'm going to run a little bit of a video that just shows some of the outreach programs that Intrepid does. It's mostly because I'm doing the whole show myself, and I'm going to go and make sure that we can get our special guest on the Zoom call here. So that is why we roll a little bit of an interval, a little bit of a video here. But let me take care of the housekeeping really quickly. We've been doing these for 2 years now. And the virtual astronomy live shows don't just magically happen. Not only is there a lot of setup work, there is also making sure that we can pay the bills. So really quickly, Virtual Astronomy Live is supported through a NASA cooperative agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. Massive thanks for the support there to help these shows and other educational programming that the museum puts out happen. Let me see. Let's go ahead and roll that other video. Don't go anywhere. Like, hey, maybe you need a drink or something like that. Like, maybe stand up, use the restroom, give me about 3 minutes here. We'll get Stephanie Stilson from NASA on, and we will hear all her stories about moving space shuttles around, not only during the program, but after they decommissioned them, and she got them to their final homes. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, and I will, like I said, 3 minutes. No later, nerds. I'm not stopping the stream. Just stay around.
Every year, more than 1 million visitors embark on a voyage of discovery at Intrepid, a museum on board an aircraft carrier devoted to the intersection of history, science, innovation, and service. They come to the museum to learn, to explore, to engage, and to see firsthand the artifacts that marked critical moments in history and spark our future. They are up close and personal with living history, learning about the past, while contemplating the possibilities of tomorrow through 21st century technology. Within Intrepid's steel walls are moments. A sense of wonder when a student sees history come alive, goosebumps when a memory is sparked, and understanding when a returning service member connects with a fellow veteran. But Intrepid's reach extends far beyond this great carrier's steel walls and decks. Every day, it is making a difference in the lives of so many, in our immediate neighborhood and all around the world. Intrepid also brings learning experiences to students participating in CASA, New York City's cultural after-school adventures program throughout its 5 boroughs. Designed to support the diverse needs of learners in New York City public schools, Intrepid's CASA programs integrate history, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math into out-of-school time experiences to help build in-school success. Our vet video chats reconnect veterans with the legacy of service.
My name is Charlotte. I'm really happy to be connecting with you all. And these are artifacts that are related to work, but also to leisure.
We are a ship of ideas, sailing forth to communities near and far, to schools, libraries, housing projects, senior centers, correctional facilities, veterans centers, and children's hospitals to engage and inspire those who can't come to us.
All right, folks, we should be back. I have clicked all the little blinking lights to get the people on the Zoom call here, but let us know if you've got audio from us. We've got 2 new faces on the stream, Summer and Stephanie. How are y'all doing today?
Hello, hello.
Hi, doing great.
Excellent. Summer's our moderator. You've seen Summer on the shows before. She's going to be hanging out with Stephanie, answering and asking some questions. And Stephanie Stilson is the special guest I've been hyping up this entire time here. So I'm going to turn the show over to y'all and let y'all take it away.
All right. Thanks, Doss.
All right.
I sort of want to just at first just say sorry, not sorry if my earrings move around and are too distracting, but they're little space shuttles. And so I kind of had to wear those.
Love it. Love it.
I had to be on theme. So, but Stephanie, welcome to the show. And I just want to give a brief intro, everyone. Stephanie Stilson is currently the chief of NASA's Enterprise Program Project Management Office in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at NASA headquarters. Does that all fit on a business card?
Don't use business cards anymore, right? Everything's virtual. So luckily I don't have to fit it on there. But the bottom of my email, yes, I squeezed that all in.
But most importantly, why we have you here today is because you were the flow director for 11 missions of the Space Shuttle Discovery from 2000 to 2011. And then after Discovery's last mission in March of 2011, you became the flow director for the transition and requirement of the Space Shuttle orbiter fleet. So you were key in preparing Enterprise, Atlantis, Endeavour, and Discovery for their final resting spots across the country.
That's right. I was honored to be a part of that. It was a very great experience.
Yeah, so I can't wait to hear all about it. But I just wanted to ask you first, just sort of a little bit about how you got into engineering in the first place, and then what brought you to NASA? How did you come to work for NASA originally?
Great. We'll have to go way back, right? So I was always interested in space and anything space related. I always read space books. I enjoyed learning about the planets. And I grew up in South Florida. And fortunately, when I was in the 3rd grade, my father took me to the Kennedy Space Center and I fell in love. I said, oh my gosh, Dad, this is what I want to do when I grow up. And, you know, he tells that story to this day, of course, but at the time he's like, okay, hon, whatever you like to do, that's great. But that was really it. Like I stood out in that rocket garden and saw those rockets and said, I want to be a part of this. And sometimes you hear, oh, I want to be an astronaut. That really wasn't the first thing for me. It was more about, I just want to be a part of NASA, whatever I can do with NASA. Being an astronaut would be a wonderful thing, but I was just wanted to be a part of it. So luckily I was pretty good in science and math. And so went on to become an engineer, studied engineering at North Carolina State University. And they had a wonderful program called cooperative education, where you could go and work in the real world, which is really important for engineers, because a lot of times, you need to know science and math, but gosh, what does it mean to be an engineer? And you don't really know. Even when you start studying, you don't really know. But getting an opportunity to go work with real engineers and hear what they're doing every day and be a part of that. I was able to do that at the Kennedy Space Center. So I applied for a position there and got lucky enough to be hired. So every other semester I'd go back and forth, which was really great because I got the good schooling on one end. And then the next semester I was off putting that learning to use and getting to know more about NASA and Kennedy Space Center.
Fantastic. So the next thing before we dive into all of the fun nerdery is, what is a flow director? What flow?
It's a funny title for, people don't really understand that very much. Well, when you think about what we do with the processing of the space shuttle, is called a processing flow. And that flow starts from the landing from the previous mission and then ends at the launch for the next mission. So that's the processing flow. And the space shuttle itself is made up of multiple components. A lot of times people think about the orbiter itself, the piece that looks like the airplane, the white airplane, as the shuttle. Well, that's actually not it. That's the orbiter of the Space Shuttle Transportation System, or STS. The whole stack is what it's called. And that's made up of that big orange external tank.
We can use this as a
perfect graphic. Yes, yes, boosters, exactly. And then the orbiter itself. And so there were multiple orbiters that flew, multiple tanks. The tanks were not reused. The boosters were reused. So altogether, that's the space shuttle stack. And you're seeing the graphic here with the processing flow. And that processing flow goes through the middle of that page, the diagonal through the middle. You'll see the track of the orbiter. The orbiter itself is the main component because it takes the longest to turn around and refurbish and get ready. because it's the most complex. 33 plus different systems on the orbiter, lots to do to get it ready to fly again the next time. And so we do that through the orbiter processing facilities. It takes about 3 months, if everything goes well, to get the orbiter ready to go. And in parallel with that work, we're also getting the tank ready and the external boosters, the external tank and the boosters ready, and they're being processed in other facilities. And then we meet all three components together in that very large vehicle assembly building that many people are very familiar with. And we stack it all together right there. And that's where in the vertical position, we bring in the boosters first, and we stack those up. Then we mate the tank, and then we bring in and we mate the orbiter. I'm making it sound really easy. It's obviously very difficult and takes a lot of precision to do that. Once that's complete, we roll the whole big stack out to the launch pad. And then we spend about 30 days on the launch pad getting ready with all the final testing, making sure the crew is familiar with everything they need to be familiar with, and then loading things up, and we're ready to go.
So I know we just mentioned what a lot of us remember is the boosters being reusable. And so I did get lucky once where I got to see them come in from the ocean where they got dropped and come through the locks. But when I was just reading up before talking to you, I saw that they got sent back to Utah on a train. And now I'm like, how did I go my whole life missing the train that had boosters on it?
Yes, all the testing and the original build and so forth happens out in Utah. And I was lucky enough to be out there one time to see a test firing, which was an amazing experience. Basically a booster sitting in the horizontal position and firing. So you can see a big, flame smoke shooting out the back. But yes, done out in a very remote area. Obviously, you don't want to do that around a lot of people. So it was a perfect location for it.
Yeah. How many people were involved in this entire flow of turning an orbiter around?
Yeah, really thousands for the entire team. And when you think about that, yes, you have people hands-on at Kennedy Space Center, but then we have people at every NASA facility that were somehow connected to the Space Shuttle program. Whether they were part of the design group out in Houston, part of the astronaut team in Houston, where the engines were built. You've got Alabama, you've got where the tanks were built in Louisiana, all over the country. And so thousands of people, and then hands-on, our team for the orbiter was a couple hundred that were hands-on right there with Discovery, which is the orbiter that I worked on.
Yeah, and so some of the things I would imagine are like checking all the tiles and checking kicking the tires, but then a lot more complicated versions of that.
Absolutely. That was the thing that really drove that processing flow timeline was over 25,000 tiles and blankets on the exterior of the orbiter itself. And those were very, very brittle and would break very easily, but they're also very important. That's what kept that orbiter from burning up during reentry. So very important, complex system of the orbiter. And so it took time to, first of all, inspect, make sure we understood what the condition was when it came back from its previous mission, and then doing any type of repair work or replacement along the way. Took a lot of time. Fortunately, a lot of that work could be done in parallel, so we'd be doing other things. Some things you could not do in parallel. If we had some type of hazardous operation going on, whether it was lifting a heavy lift type of operation, or if it was something that had a hypergol or cryogenics, something that you would not want to have exposed to human beings, that would of course limit the number of people that could be inside the orbiter processing facility at the time. So my team did all that of balancing that work, making sure we were getting the work done as quickly as possible, but also in the most safe manner we could to meet our deadlines.
And so when you switched from the flow director for a given shuttle to the flow director for the sort of decommissioning and retiring and moving of the shuttles, what stuff was involved in that? Like how much of the actual shuttles got taken out or off?
Yeah, preparing the orbiters for their final destination was actually very similar to preparing for next flight because of dealing with all those safety hazards and so forth. So we did a lot of offloading of chemicals and things. And just in this case, we didn't re-onload a lot of those things. Right. So we would drain systems, but we wouldn't refill them. Discovery was unique in the sense that Discovery is considered the vehicle of record. So of all of the 3 orbiters that flew in space that we have in museums now, Discovery is the one that is the most close to how it was when it flew. And that was intentional because of the Smithsonian having that vehicle. And so not just because we wanted that vehicle to be there for people to get to view and see close up, that's a wonderful thing, but also so in the future, when we go back and learn about our past, we'd have something that we could do that with. When you go to Smithsonian now and you see, the flight that was used for the very first airplane flights and stuff like that, people still study those things. Well, that same thing's going to happen with Discovery. We know a lot about it right now, but 100 years from now, there's probably going to be somebody that wants to learn a little bit more from our past. And so we wanted that vehicle to be as pristine as possible. But the main thing that had to be removed, obviously, were those things that would be dangerous to the public. So pyrotechnics, hypergaus, cryogenics, those kind of things. But other than that, we try to keep it as whole as possible, as it was when it landed.
So if you could peek in the windows of any of the given shuttles, you'd still see like the chairs, the panels, all of those things.
Yes, a lot of those things we took out so we could refurbish, clean up, do whatever we need to do, but then put them back in for the most part, unless it was something that could be reused. That was another thing that NASA had to balance and to decide, what could we do to reuse. Space Shuttle main engines are a great example of that.
Yeah.
When you see Discovery right now, the nozzle that you see, which is on the exterior that you can visibly see, that's a real nozzle. But if you were to look inside the aft compartment, you wouldn't see all the complexities and the engine part that makes up the Space Shuttle main engine. We used to call it a nozzle on a stick, because that's kind of what it looked like compared to what it had been before. Well, that's because we were able to reuse those main engines. So we wanted to do that. But we had enough of the nozzles themselves that we could use those. And so from an external perspective, it still looked and it is the real thing.
Did I get the right graphic there, Stephanie? I brought up the replica shuttle main engine installed on Discovery. Is that the right graphic, or did I pull up the wrong graphic?
Exactly.
Whew.
Yes,
okay.
That's it. You did good. You did great.
Hey, I've got a question coming in from chat really quickly, if y'all don't mind. Was there one flow director for each shuttle, or were there different flow directors, or how did that work out?
There was for each orbiter.
And
thank you. Yes, for each of the orbiters. And so each of the flow directors, we stayed with that orbiter. So you'd have different external tanks, different boosters, but we were always with that particular orbiter. So myself, Dana Hutcherson for OV-105, yes. And Angie Brewer was for 104, so for Endeavour and Atlantis. And so at the time, it was the only time that you had 3 female flow directors all at the same time was at the end of the program. So yeah, we shared a lot of great memories together, and they're both still doing great things.
The question was a total setup so I could show this one picture. I gave, y'all can't see me, but I gave Stephanie a thumbs up when we started talking about this. So. Again, if y'all have questions, y'all tag us in chat. Let us know. We'll try to get as many of your questions as we can, and we'll mix some of those in here with Summer and Stephanie. Keep going, y'all.
Yeah, so you mentioned that some of the engines were reused. Where were they reused? Where are some of them?
Yes, they are being reused. So they're going to be part of the Artemis program right now.
Okay.
And so I looked it up, and the engines that are being reused had flown on all of the different vehicles, because what we did is we rotated engines. So that was one of the things, as soon as an orbiter landed, one of the things we did for post-processing was removing those engines and then processing them in their own standalone facility. And so those engines just got swapped around. So it wasn't always the same 3 engines on Discovery every time. They moved around because they had their own processing flow that they would go through. And so the ones that are being reused have flown on multiple orbiters.
That's so cool. I never knew that. So of these four shuttles that are now all across the country, are there any major differences between them, except for the fact of, Enterprise not being a flight vehicle? Are the other ones, are there just little things that are different between them, but nothing major? They're all sort of the same airframe and the same bones.
Right. For the 3 that flew in space, they're all very similar. There are some slight differences. I will tell you that Discovery is the heaviest because it's the oldest. So it has some equipment in there that the newer orbiters did not have, that made it a bit heavier. But functionality wise, they were all able to function in the same way. But yes, there are some slight differences between the 3 of them.
And is Discovery your favorite?
Of course. I liken Discovery as being my child. I don't have any children of my own, so I'm going to claim Discovery as my child. And, I say that jokingly, but the time that those of us that were fortunate enough to work with Discovery, the time we had with her, and we do call her, You know, you take care of her like she's your baby. And so she becomes a member of your family. We get very attached. We'd even have a little rivalry between the different processing teams about which orbiter was the best, you know, and so will always say Discovery is the best. I'm sure Angie and Dana would tell you their vehicles were the best. And it's all in good fun, but yes, very, very strong attachment. And when I left Florida, I moved up to DC, and a lot of my friends joked. They said, "Oh, you're just following Discovery. You want to be close to Discovery." Well, that's a good reason to move to DC. I'm okay with that.
I have an image that fits this discussion.
That's perfect. I was going to ask, like, how often you go visit her.
Not as often as I would like. Most of the time when I have family in town, we'll go, or especially if there are friends of mine that worked on Discovery with me, we'll go. And I tell you what, I will admit that I get teary-eyed every time I go, just because there's such fond memories. I very much have a strong attachment to my family at the Smithsonian as well, and they're doing an excellent job of taking care of Discovery. I've made some very good friends there through the course of us getting together with them and bringing Discovery up to the Smithsonian. But it's, you know, those were very fond memories for me, and it's like, again, like seeing a family member you haven't seen in a long time. You know, you tear up when you see them.
Yeah, Stephanie, real quick question here. When you go to see the shuttles, do you pay admission, or do you show up at the door like, I'm here to visit my baby?
If I'm by myself, I can usually get in without having to pay. But if I'm with guests, then obviously I'll follow the rules and pay too. But, you know, I'm very fortunate. A lot of times there'll still be people that will recognize me there when I come in, which makes me feel great. Down at Kennedy, when you go to see in Atlantis there, they have a video that I happened to be in the beginning. So I've had folks that have said to me, "Hey, I saw you in the video when I went to see her." Yeah. So that's neat too. So it's always good to have people remember that part of my career.
And of course, I'm not advocating going and trying to get into museums for free, y'all. Definitely support the museums so they can continue to preserve these artifacts for generations to come. Like my disclaimer there.
Or you can go to the one downtown for free.
There you go.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I grew up in Northern Virginia. So I grew up going to the Air and Space. And I remember when Udvar Hazy was built, and it was so awesome that it was, because I had heard some statistic about that Air and Space only had 20% of what they owned on display in the downtown museum. So in order to have this new space where they could put so much else, you used to be able to go to Anacostia, to like where their warehouses were, and get these tours from some of the people that had flown some of those things, which was really cool. But they were all sitting on top of each other, and it was cool.
Yes, I have been to that warehouse before. Yeah. I know where you're talking about, and it's amazing how much they still have there. I think they try to kind of rotate, but gosh, there's just so much and not enough space to have it all out. You're right.
Yeah, but it's so cool that they have now a space shuttle too, because that's the biggest and the best of the collection. So what's the most complicated part of sort of retiring the shuttle? And is it in part of the retirement process, or was it much more a part of the transportation process for each of them?
Yeah, the safing the vehicles was, I won't say that difficult, just because that's part of what we have always done, right? Really more it was the delivery, and not because we hadn't done that before either, because anytime a space shuttle orbiter landed in California, we would have to transport it back. And so we were using the same process when we were now delivering the orbiters for their final flights. But still, there's a lot more outside of your control when you're flying cross country versus when you're in a controlled environment of a processing facility. So that was the real complicated part. Plus, you're also dealing with other organizations, right? We're having to work with the airports to make sure we can do it. In the case of working out in California, towing an orbiter through the streets of LA, that was pretty complex, right? Yeah. And you see the picture here of the touchdown coming into LA, all the people, and there's the transport, which was an amazing endeavor and a great thing to have happen. But very, very complicated, took a lot of coordination and work there. So I think that was probably bigger to us than the actual safety of the vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably had so much bureaucracy to go through in order to do that, just because it's, you know, coming into a city and counties and other states and everything to try and take over all of the roadways as well and disrupt all of the normal flow.
And really, and trying to think ahead of anything that could come up. You know, making sure, do we have enough space? Are we able to move where we turn? Okay, can we turn the way we need to turn? What's the route going to look like? All those things. Yeah, very, very complex. And as you mentioned, a lot of different municipalities and organizations that were involved that had to be brought into the conversation to make sure that we would do this properly.
And luckily, you know, it doesn't rain that much in California, but did you have weather constraints for all of these shuttle moves as well? Yeah. You mentioned like just flying cross country, but I would assume that like wind and storms or.
Absolutely. Right. So the biggest is in the actual transport itself, because of those tile that I mentioned that are very fragile. So any type of moisture in the air when you're flying the orbiter on top of the 747 across country, that moisture can turn in almost like BBs that will just tear up the tile. Now, these vehicles weren't going to fly in space again, so the criticality of the system working wasn't as important, but we also didn't want to deliver an orbiter that was all torn to shreds. You know, we wanted to be in the best shape possible. So we followed all the same precautions that we would have followed if we were still flying those vehicles in space when we transported them on the 747. So we would not fly through any type of precipitation, so no moisture at all. And one way that we dealt with that, besides using the tremendous knowledge of meteorologists and so forth that were helping us, was there was a crew of us that were able to fly in the Pathfinder vehicle, which was a DC-9 that flew out about 30 minutes ahead of the shuttle carrier aircraft. And that allowed not me as a passenger, but the pilot and so forth, and there you see us on the plane, let them see whether or not, you know, think about when you take a plane flight, the pilot doesn't always know when you're going to run into any turbulence or you're going to run into any moisture in the air, rain or not. So it allowed us to, if we did hit something like that, to radio back to the pilots of the shuttle carrier aircraft and say, hey, you need to divert a little bit. We're hitting some moisture here. Let's you know, or if things got really bad, you know, we could think about where we were going to land. So the picture there, the DC-9, us getting in there, and in the earlier one you saw, you know, not really luxurious, but it had everything we needed. We had comfortable seats and was able to have us be in that Pathfinder. Also because we needed to be there, our crew needed to be there before the shuttle carrier aircraft landed. So it got us there early. So we got there about 30 minutes ahead of time and got us in.
What are you seeing?
Yep.
I was seeing what the plugs were for. I wanted to see what the converter label said on there, but it just says converter for. So sorry.
Yeah,
no.
I apparently did that live and showed it to everybody when I'm trying to see, oh, is that video or what is that?
I think I like zooming in on technical
I like
photos.
zooming in on things.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So
we're kind of like a scout vehicle of sorts.
Yeah. Stephanie.
Yes, exactly. And that was it. Right, exactly. Yes.
You mentioned something that we talked about in the pre-show a little bit in the moisture, right? And so really quickly, this is Enterprise arriving at Intrepid, but Eric with Intrepid told us the story about these little things on the size of Enterprise, and apparently there was some like home insulation bungee cord shenanigans that they used to try and keep water from getting inside Enterprise, not while it's flying, but while it was being moved around on the barge. So do you know any more stories about those wacky little insulation bungee cord things?
Well,
I know we did. Yeah,
we did have some issues with water intrusion for that, and did our best we could where we could to keep the orbiters out of the rain, but you know, we did get water intrusion and have to drain and things like that. So yes, I had forgotten about that. So I'm glad Eric brought that up. Yes, that was so always something fun and different that we had to do. But that's to try to keep that water from getting in. Those are our vent ports that were being covered. Yeah. And we just had never been in a situation where we thought we were going to need to have it out in the elements for that long. And so all of a sudden we are. So our ingenious engineers came up with the quickest and best way that we could do that. So that's what they did.
Apparently there was a story about Enterprise marking her territory when she arrived on the deck as some of those water drains did their draining.
So. Yes.
All right.
I also love that Eric mentioned that he kept a bunch of those. So they're preserved in
There you go.
Intrepid's archive.
Stephanie's got to be
you
like the entire complicated orbiter processing program, and you're talking about little pieces of insulation.
Right.
All right, let's go back to other things.
Well, did he also talk about the weights that we had to put in the forward compartment? Did you guys talk about that at all?
No, but I was going to ask.
Oh, okay. And I don't know that I shared that picture with you. I should have. So in order to, we always have to do weight and CG, center of gravity, for each of the orbiters before you ferry them and so forth. And we needed extra weight in the forward compartment of Enterprise because Enterprise didn't have all the seats and the lockers and all those things, right? So it was very barren in there. So what did we do? We went down to the local athletic store and bought a bunch of big circular weights, like barbell weights, and rigged them up in there and secured them in there. And of course, you know, we made sure everything was done safely and securely, and we had 2 and 3 sets of different eyes checking it out, making sure it was right. But once again, you know, you don't want to over-engineer something, right? If you have a simple solution, that's always going to be the best solution. Go with the simple solution, and that's what we did.
Was that with Enterprise specifically, or was that all the orbiters?
No, just with Enterprise.
Just with Enterprise. Yep. They're still there. Because Eric,
I'm sure they are.
Eric did a tour inside Enterprise, and he was like, "Oh, and these are just regular weights," and they showed us the regular weights a couple days ago. No kidding.
Yep.
So I know that wasn't your shuttle, but how tricky was it trying to get a shuttle off of a floating barge onto an aircraft carrier that is somewhat stabilized, I guess, but still it's not on proper solid ground?
Well, all of that move, that was not under my control. My team did not do that. We were there. We were lucky enough to be invited to be a part of that and to see that, which was amazing to watch that happen. But obviously, we had a vested interest, right? So we were kept in the loop the whole way that was being set up and put together and getting ready. But yeah, quite amazing and similar in some ways to what we did when we were onloading and offloading of the SCA, which you see the picture here, the shuttle carrier aircraft, and the way that we have the cranes set up to simulate the mate-demate device that we had at Kennedy and also at California. And so that's what was different about this type of delivery is when we were leaving Kennedy Space Center with each of the orbiters, we have a mate-demate device there that allows us to pretty easily do that connection. And there you go. There's the picture, right? Well, that's the one in California that they started tearing it down. Yes.
Yeah, I was
Yeah. If you keep digging down, so you probably have another one of
I do.
That has the device. And
there's
so
a better one.
There you go. Right. And so see, what we do is basically we would tow the orbiter first up under that structure, then lift the orbiter up, and then tow in the shuttle carrier aircraft, and then lower the orbiter down, and then connect it. I'm making it very simplistic, but that's really what we were doing. And so that made it pretty easy. Well, now when you're dealing with a runway at JFK, you don't have this nice mate-demate device. So that's where we use those big, heavy cranes and wind stabilizing systems and the orbiter sling, which is the yellow piece that connects to the orbiter itself. And so all those things were used to take care of that. And Summer, you'd mentioned weather. That's another thing too. Any winds, we could not operate with winds because you're trying to not only position that shuttle carrier aircraft underneath that large orbiter, which in itself is about the size of a DC-9, if folks aren't familiar with the size of an orbiter. But then now you've got to mate it onto basically tripods and with these big heavy bolts and connect it. And you have personnel that are there and they're in cherry pickers. So they're in high ranger type of baskets themselves. And so very strict wind limitations on that to make sure that that we didn't have anything unsafe for our employees and then also for the equipment.
I found one. There's one of the aerial work platforms that is up working on the yellow thing.
Yes, exactly. The yellow thing is the sling. Right?
Thank you.
Call that the sling.
I was going to say it. I was like, she just said what it was, and then I faked myself out and didn't want to get it wrong. The sling.
The sling.
So do those slings exist anymore? Or because their sole purpose was really to hold a shuttle up?
Yeah. I believe that the California Science Center still has one because they're still planning to move their orbiter into the horizontal position. And so they would need the sling to do that. So there's at least one there. We had two. I'm not sure if both are there or not. But yes, you definitely still have a sling there in California.
Yeah, that feels like a good thing just to keep on the side, just in case, because
absolutely.
purpose.
And most likely, yeah. And you know, and if for folks that haven't gone to visit each of the orbiters, I really would recommend you do a road show and hit them all, because they're all very different, including Enterprise, in the way they're displayed and what you learn and what you see when you're there. So get your passport and go hit them all.
I've got to do this real quick because here's Enterprise being offloaded in New York City, and then of course LA shows up with Endeavour and does this one here. Oops, that's a little bit too big actually. So California showing off with the sunset. Yeah, this would make a fantastic like print on the wall if you ask me.
Yes.
There is a backed off shot of that actually shows the two cranes, and this is two different cranes that are used in tandem, I guess, at the same time to move it around when you didn't have the whole mate device, right?
Exactly right. And you can imagine how tedious that is, right? Here you are, you're lifting this huge thing with these two cranes, two separate operators who are in contact with headphones, and then you've got a lift commander who's talking to both of them, and he's on the ground and he's watching everything from different perspectives. You've got spotters all the way around. Yeah, very tedious. It's a couple-day operation. It's not a quick thing to do.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds like something where I'd be holding my breath if I was in charge of that.
Well, speaking of holding your breath, at some point, Dash, you got to show that picture of the shuttle on top of the SCA that I took from the window of the Pathfinder. Did you see that one?
Which shuttle was it?
That one's, it would have been Endeavour, because it was going out to California, so it's in that folder.
That is going to be that one.
Yes. So I had to set up this story. I mentioned the Pathfinder, and my team would ride in the Pathfinder, and typically we're 30 minutes out ahead. And so we never would see the vehicle like this. We'd land and then we'd see it land. So we'd take off before it took off, and then we'd land. So all of a sudden the pilot comes on and says, "Hey, how about you guys take a look out the right side of the plane?" And sure enough, here we are. And look how close our wingtip looks to the shuttle carrier aircraft. I was, of course, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Then I was like, back away, back away. You're too close. I just was so nervous, but that was my job, right? To be nervous about it the whole time. So yes, just an amazing treat that the pilot set up for us to do that and to give us all that view that, how many people got to see that. So it was a really special time for us.
Yeah, I think the most exciting pilot announcement I've gotten is just, a given city full of lights on the left side of the plane. So you're right. You'll see the space shuttle. What was I going to ask? Which one? Yeah, so you were mentioning like taking a road trip and seeing all of them, because I think I've only seen 2 of them, but for Atlantis and the one,
Endeavour?
Yeah, can you go underneath them? Because I love that aspect of the one on the Intrepid, is that you can walk underneath it instead of around it.
So Atlantis down at Kennedy Space Center is set up so that it is as if it's on orbit. And so it's still, there we go, there was the picture. So it's tilted. And so that one the payload bay doors are open. You can go underneath it. And then you see they've got that nice walkway around the edge, so you can really get a great view inside. So they've done an amazing job of really giving you that perspective of it being on orbit, which I love about that. So that one's there. And then in California right now, I don't know if you can go under it. I can't remember how far they do have it jacked up, but I don't know how far it is right now. And then of course, Discovery, they have down on its nose, on its landing gear, so as if it were being towed right in. Right, yeah.
The last time I was in California, you could walk under it, because I marveled at the earthquake protection devices. They actually have it sitting on little bearing plates to protect against vibrations from earthquakes. So I was walking around underneath it, looking at those like, whoa, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Anecdotally.
Yeah, no, that
is really cool, because that's another aspect of like, what are the dangers once it's at its final spot? What other disasters could befall it? So clearly, California earthquakes. I wonder how hurricane proof the Intrepid is. I have no idea. We should get Eric back.
Get Eric back. Nice.
But what's also unique about the Enterprise is that you can see, by nature of being able to walk that close underneath it, you can see what I've been told is some of the damage from, they used it as a tester for what Columbia underwent during launch. And so you can see
so the amazing thing about Enterprise is we would not have had any of the other space shuttles without Enterprise. I mean, that proved the concept that we could actually land these things, you know, as gliders coming out of space. And so, you know, I think a lot of people don't realize that when they look at the other vehicles and how important a role Enterprise played in our overall space shuttle program.
Yeah, I think this isn't the purpose of the image, but I think I've got it there on the wing where they actually did some impact testing in the carbon up on the leading edge of the wing.
Oh, right. Yes, yes. So you're right. They did take panels off of Enterprise to use for the testing after the Columbia accident. Right, exactly right. Because they did have the reinforced panels, carbon panels there. That were used. That's good, very good point. I'd forgotten that. Thanks for bringing that back up.
Yeah, and you can see them there at the museum. Like as you walk around Enterprise, you can see like, oh, what happened there, and they'll explain to you what the purpose of that is.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Exactly. Das, do you have some questions piling up?
Oh, I have questions. Some of them are sort of offensive questions to shuttle lovers, it sounds like. But did anybody try to convince people that the shuttles needed to be dismantled in some way to be moved around, like take the wings off or something like that to move them around? Was that an idea, or was it always, no, shuttles move the way shuttles are?
That was definitely discussed, because when you think about the first thing that came to folks' minds were moving aircraft. And typically when you move large aircraft, which people have done, you remove the wings and have that happen. Because of all the tile and the exterior structure of the orbiters, that just wasn't going to be feasible to do that. We never, once they were built and put together, ever took the wings off of the orbiters at all. So that just, you know, yes, it was discussed as a potential, but turned out that was just not going to be a feasible option.
Makes sense. Summer, I've got a couple other questions here, if that's okay. Yeah. So here's a question from Martin. In the whole flow process, so back before we're transporting them, was there ever a step that always seems to take longer than expected? Like every time we get to, I don't know, emptying that one tank or whatever, was there like ever a sticking point that you identified?
It was usually the thermal protection system because of those 25,000 tile, and every tile is unique. So you could not just say, oh, I've got a spare tile number 5 here, let me go put it in slot number 7. Nope, that's not going to work. And so we just constantly, you never knew until you got the vehicle back on the ground what you would be dealing with from a thermal protection system refurbishment perspective. And so we never were really good about saying, oh yeah, it's going to take this long, because we just couldn't estimate it until we got our eyeballs on it. I won't say our hands on it, because we didn't touch anything unless we absolutely had to, but you got your eyeballs on it. And it's such a precise system, and there's a lot of step and gap measurements you have to do, and it's just there's a lot of detail to it. Very importantly so, because of the criticality.
Yeah, and I got this picture up with all the detailed tiles of, I call it battle damage. Like when the orbiters went to orbit and came back, it was like they were doing battle with the atmosphere, right? So I call it battle damage, even though it's not really like a war thing. But you can see like the wear and tear on all the tiles, and that's one of the great things if you go and visit the shuttles, visit the orbiters. I'm trying to do good. Visit them at the museums. You can really tell that difference between Atlantis and Discovery and all the sort of heat effects in the way that the sides are sort of like a little, not charred, but you know what I mean, discolored. Then you go see Enterprise and you're like, wow, all right, looks like you had an easy life.
Yeah, I always refer to it as trauma. So you're exactly right. I mean, what these orbiters went through coming back to the surface of the Earth was amazing. And there was also talk about, well, why don't you just go clean them up? If you're going to put them on display, clean them up. And we were very adamant. No, we want people to see these vehicles have been used and they've been through this trauma before, especially, you know, with Discovery, once again, that vehicle of record. But none of the orbiters did they go in and say, oh, let's go paint it and make it shiny white again or anything, because that all tells the story of these orbiters and what they went through. and you can talk to different people that have worked on them, and they can point to certain things and say, oh yeah, I worked there, and here's what happened there. Here's why this one looks real white around a bunch of them that are more gray, because it's brand new. We had to go replace that. So yeah, it's all part of the story.
Yeah, this is the motion I made when we mentioned, oh, clean them up. I was like,
no,
it looks so real. Like when you look at it and you see the effects of going to space and back again 30 times, et cetera, it really makes it real. Like we really did that stuff. So please don't restore them back to pristine shape. Leave them telling their stories.
Just going back to Atlantis for a second, one of the pictures that you sent us has it completely wrapped up.
Yeah.
What was that for?
So the interesting part about Atlantis, because they all had their own journey, was we already had a visitor center at Kennedy Space Center, but they were building this new piece of visitor center to house Atlantis. And so as you can tell from the picture, the work wasn't done, and they didn't want the work to be completely done because they still had to bring the vehicle in. So can you imagine having a big box? Well, you got to get the vehicle inside, so you can't close out that box until you get the vehicle in there. So what they did was they did this basically shrink wrapping. And then I liken it if you've seen big boats being transported, big yachts, sometimes you'll see them shrunk wrap like that too. And so they did that to protect the vehicle from the elements until they could get it, fully enclosed and secure like that. So another processing flow that took a lot of time and different intricate things that they had to do to get it there and get it in the right position.
Yeah, I think we've got that.
Wrap an orbiter.
Very carefully.
Oh yeah, it was just basically the same shrink wrap that you would do with something small. Same thing, just on a bigger scale.
Yeah. I brought up this one because this is it going into the visitors complex. Like you had to have a hole in the size of the building that you could fit a full space shuttle through. And so this was it coming in. And after they got it into the building, that's when they did the wrapping to protect it from the rest of the construction that was happening around it. And it looks like it was wrapped even while they put it into the sort of awesome tilted position, the on-orbit position or whatever, right?
That's right. Yeah, they got it onto that final stand when it was in its wrap state, yes.
No kidding. Next time I go to the visitors center, I'm going to be like, how do you think they got that in there? As a setup to actually knowing the answer to the question because I was hanging out with
you. Stephanie, was there any kind of, after all of the orbiters got to where they were going, was there sort of a debriefing meeting of all you flow directors to sort of both celebrate that you guys all did it, but also figure out, how that went from all of the different
we stayed in close contact throughout all of the journeys there. So we celebrated those milestones along the way. And so we didn't really have any kind of a debrief at that point. At that point, people were kind of starting to move on to their next endeavors and what they were working on and so forth. But we do keep in touch. We hear from each other on email every now and then, and they do have some reunions down at Kennedy. They try to do that on a regular basis. Of course, COVID threw a wrench into that for everybody. So I'm sure they're going to start those back up again. Majority still work doing something in the space program, whether either with NASA or with another company. So yeah, we try to stay in touch.
I like to think there's a flow director group chat that you guys have.
Nice, a group chat.
Good start.
Yeah. So what are some of I think you also shared with us some of the ferry flight constraints. Even when it was just actually like landing at Edwards and going to Kennedy, and also both when you were moving them to their final locations, are they flying up at the same altitudes, the regular height that all the passenger commercial jets are flying at too?
And I'm not going to remember the exact altitude, but it's comparable, but a little bit lower, I believe, was than what we normally would. And then they would try to then be able to avoid cloud banks and that kind of thing. So lightning, of course, was another big one that they would have to avoid. And if need be, that's when we would end up stopping. So depending on how far we were traveling. So let's talk about the farthest one we did for the retirement was out to California, and that was our typical jaunt back and forth. So we usually, for this, on the way from Florida out to California, we ended up going and stopping in Houston. So we did a leg to Houston and stopped there. And that allowed us to do some ceremonial things there with the workforce in Houston. So that's just such a big part of the Space Shuttle program there. And then from there, we flew to Edwards Air Force Base. And then from there, we flew to LAX. So obviously fuel constrains where you go, weather constrains where you go. So that's the flight path we ended up taking. Now we had a bunch of different options set out. So in case weather didn't behave and we had to go a different route, we could do that. But we also were a little less constrained by time. If we were still flying the space shuttles, we'd be very anxious to get it back to Kennedy to start that next flow. And so we would end up maybe going in a different path to get back quicker if we could and avoid weather, as opposed to staying put in one location and waiting for the weather to pass.
Right. Yeah, that was another question I was going to ask, was how time constrained were each of these moves? Were they each of the moves sort of self-contained to a team, or did you also have sort of a bigger team that would oversee each one of them? So they had to be done in sequence, or could they happen in parallel?
So no, we had them in sequence, but we only had one set of wind restraint equipment. So when you saw that picture of everything set up on the tarmac, and the best one to really illustrate that would be us bringing Discovery up to Washington, D.C., and then Enterprise up to New York. Because what we had to do was we had to get Discovery ready to go down at Kennedy. Then we had to bring basically that same team up to Udvar-Hazy to prepare Enterprise. And we can talk more about what it took to do that. Then we had to prepare the apron, the tarmac at the landing facility there at Dulles. And that's the equipment you're seeing in the picture here. So that's one set of equipment there that we had to set up. So then we'd have to take that team back to Kennedy, get Discovery through that demate device on top of the 747, fly it up, go here, offload using the equipment that you see in the picture. Once we got Discovery offloaded and towed over to Udvar-Hazy, then we towed Enterprise out to the apron, used the same equipment to put Enterprise on top of the 747, and then flew up to New York. Now remember, I got to get this equipment that you're seeing in this picture that's in Dulles. Now I got to get that up to New York to JFK.
Right.
So we got Enterprise up there and ended up parking Enterprise in the what do you call it, a de-icing tent, right? A big de-icing tent to try to protect it the best we could. Yeah. Then we had to take down all the equipment in Dulles, ship it up to JFK, and then reinstall all at JFK. And it takes about 30 days to do that part. So yeah, a lot of coordination between doing that to make sure that the goal was to keep the orbiters protected as best we could, out of the elements as best we could. But then we also had to factor in the time it would take to build up and tear down all that equipment and ship it.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I ask really quickly, Stephanie, what is this equipment? I know what cranes are. Like, I understand cranes. And there's like a crane here, and then there's another crane, and there's two parts of the yellow sling, and one crane gets each. We talked about that. But what are the poles for? Like, did the flow directors like dance around the pole once it was all done, or how does that like a maypole sort of thing?
No. Yeah. So that's really what's called the wind restraint system. And if you look closely, you can see there's cables coming down from each of those. Those cables connect to that yellow sling, and that's what's keeping the orbiter from doing this when you're trying to get it on top of the 747. Right. So it's a stabilization system is exactly what it is. Okay. So you can't see it probably in these pictures, but there's big winches at each of those poles. And those winches are basically hand crank winches that allow us to tighten or loosen those cables to keep there from any sway.
We got lucky on this one. The cable was actually slack because it was down on the ground, and you can see the cable going from the pole and then the white tail cone there going up to there. And so it's loose there. It's not providing the tension, but those four poles would attach to the sling to get you that. It's almost like the little taglines that you see people walking a crane load around with. No kidding.
That's exactly right.
But when they were doing it, these were cranked taut, right? You'd put a little bit of tension on them, I guess, to make sure the whole thing's that you don't want to tug-of-war sideways or anything. But no kidding. I did not know that. That is really cool. We can stop the show. I learned something. We're good. No, keep teaching
Job
us
done.
stuff. Keep telling us stuff. This is amazing. Thank you.
I know, it really is. You made me forget my other question, Dallas.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think it was because I remember I was in New York when the Enterprise came up, and they did a, like a PR flight all around New York to get these amazing pictures. Would they have just done that as like a separate flight once it got to JFK? Did they sort of get everything ready and do that, or did they just start from DC, fly up and do the fly around, and then
we did the fly around before we did the
planned
landing.
into that itinerary?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was important, right? There were people all over the country that were going to get to see something that they would never have seen it otherwise. And so we wanted to plan that. And our public affairs office, I think, did a tremendous job of taking that into account and making sure that we could give that opportunity to as many people as possible. And yeah, there's just tremendous pictures of that. And just, I talked to so many people that were just, even to this day, will say, oh my gosh, I can tell you exactly where I was. And when I saw the orbiter fly over top, and it was amazing to see it. And that's those will be memories that people will have for their entire life. Yeah.
I had to circle the Intrepid down there. The reason this photo is framed the way it is because Intrepid's down on the bottom, and then the SAA with, that should be Enterprise up there, right, on the top. But I've got a couple different photos like that from the different transports. I think there was one with the Golden Gate Bridge, which would probably be, here we go.
Yeah, I remember for Enterprise, I was on the roof of Columbia Physics Building.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it was very cool. Yeah, that's a great shot.
Got the Hollywood sign in there. We've got this is where I would have been, honestly. Like the road just outside the runway at LAX, I guess. Yeah. God.
Yep.
Poor Atlantis. Did Atlantis not get as much paparazzi?
Well, it had quite a bit on the ground. On the ground, you're rolling out to it's a couple miles. Yeah. So they had a big parade, and they had people lining the sides. They had quite a bit of pomp and circumstance there too, getting her to her final spot.
Atlantis got this. This is what Atlantis got. The shuttle Xing sign.
I need that sign.
All the other orbiters were like Golden Gate in the background, Hollywood sign, New York City, and Atlantis got the sign.
That's cool. That's like out on Highway 60 here in New Mexico. There's a sign that says antenna crossing because they take the VLA antennas sometimes across. Yeah, to take them across the highway.
I gotta do this one real quick. I pulled this one out of the NASA spaceflight archives, and you've got the iconic the shot where it's going over Central Park, right? Like everybody knows the shot where it's flying over Central Park. Here we go. There's one of them over New York City, right? But I found this one here, which is sort of the Florida edition. It's not Central Park. It's not a bunch of buildings. It's just palm trees.
Yep. Every location's a little bit different, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so is it the same aircraft for all of those? So just one?
Yes. So we had two shuttle carrier aircrafts during at least two. We might have even had more at one point in time. But if I remember correctly, we used the same one for all those flights. I don't think we swapped them out at that point. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool claim to fame for that flight crew.
Yes, and they felt very honored and did an amazing job, and they have stories to tell for sure. Yeah.
Were they,
and inside that, I didn't give you any pictures, but inside that 747, I always liken it to a bowling alley because it's completely empty inside. So and you think about, we get on a plane to travel, and you're seat after seat after seat, and it's just a big, huge open space. Because they were obviously trying to make it as light as possible because they're going to put this big, heavy orbiter on top of it.
Yeah. Were there flight patches for each of the transportation missions?
Yes, they had the shuttle carrier aircraft had their own patch that they made up, and then for each of the delivery, yes. And then you see the one I'm wearing. Is our offload and orbiters on display, if you can see that. So that was the one that Dennis Jenkins made that up. He was my counterpart, and he made that up. So, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Is that the one that's like on the ferry and display site logistics PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got the two little, I don't know if you can see that.
I'll see if I can find that real quick. Yeah.
If you pull that one up, you'll see the detail of it.
The top folder. Yeah, that's cool that you guys did that. I love that.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, I didn't have a preview of that one because it was embedded in the PowerPoint, but there you go. There's the patch on your shirt, right?
Yep.
It says orbiters on display.
It's got the SCA and the orbiter on top, and then the simulated cranes there. Yeah.
Look at the detail there. I don't know if I would trust that crane design to lift anything important. Seems to be missing some counterweights, but it's got the sling and everything. I'm going to say sling like 15 times so I remember. That's really cool.
And the landing gear detail.
Yep. Well, and that's another thing too that was a little different on each of them, right? When we brought Discovery into DC, when we took it off of the 747 and put it on the ground, we put it on its landing gear, and we towed on its landing gear, and that was the picture Dashi showed earlier, I think, of me standing in front of it, and it was on its landing gear. With Enterprise and then also with Endeavor, they were on transporters, but different transporters. So there we go. So that's just as if it had landed and was standing on the runway after a flight. So that's how it was, and we're towing it. And if we were at Kennedy, it would look just like that if it had landed at Kennedy the same way. And then the different transporters were used for the other two, as opposed to bringing their gear down and putting them right down on their gear.
I think I got one here. Let's see here. Yeah, this is the Enterprise on the transporter there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And that's inside that de-icing tent that I said we stored it in for a while to keep it out of the elements the best we could, right? I mean, it's not completely out of the elements, but it was better than it sitting out there under the sun in the rain. Yeah. And you see the tail cone there as well.
Now that I know what I'm looking for, every shot of it, I see the little stabilizers going off to the side. Y'all should be able to see that, but see all the stabilizers there and there. I would have never I didn't notice those beforehand. It's like, oh, awesome, shuttle, yellow, sling, etc. And now every time I'm like, oh, stabilizers, nice.
It's your version of squirrel.
The squirrel, exactly. Stabilizers, cranes. And this is actually answering a question that Harry asked a little bit before. We've talked about this some, but did you have to do any additional prep work or relearning in lifting the orbiters via the sling's cranes versus lifting with the mate-demate? Like, I imagine those stabilizers are part of the mate-demate device, so you don't need to put up yellow maypoles all around, right? But when you took it to a place that didn't have the mate-demate, was there anything beyond those stabilizers that you sort of had to take into account or deal with?
Well, we had that set of equipment for a couple reasons. The main reason we still had the equipment was if something on a landing were to have gone wrong and we had to land in a transatlantic location. So if we didn't land at Kennedy or if we didn't land in California, we landed somewhere else, which we had some set sites that we could do that. That's the type of system that we would have used. Fortunately, we never did that, so we didn't have to. But of course, we had to be ready to go and have that every time we had a shuttle mission. And then also we had a trip to the World's Fair with Enterprise, and they loaded on the 747, and so we had used it in the past. That was many years before I was around, right? And so the team that we had, some of them had been familiar with it, but not everyone. So basically, it was a matter of pulling all that out and relearning it, and then upgrading where necessary to take advantage of improvements where we thought it was needed, that kind of thing. So we did a lot of simulation and testing with that equipment way before we even thought about, hooking it up to the orbiters themselves. So I can't think of anything specific out of it that we did other than just, making sure that it was all going to work the way we expected, and then modernizing where we needed to.
Yeah, that was existing equipment deployed at a different place, not like, oh, create an entire new process because we've never been to an airport before.
That's right. Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. We're real big about, reuse what you know, right? Don't go just build something new just to do it. If we have something that works, we're going to use it, and that's what we did. Oddly enough, one of the biggest concerns was at the airfields, we had to drill holes in the ground in order to attach all these things. And obviously, so those are tarmacs. Those are airfields that are not just used by us. And so there was a lot that had to happen to make sure that once we were finished, that we could return the site to the exact pristine condition it was in. So a lot of coordination ahead of time to make sure that the airfields were comfortable with what we were doing.
Yeah,
makes
sense.
I learned in 2007 when I went to Easter Island, I learned that airstrip is long enough so that the shuttle can land there.
Oh, I did not know that. Very interesting. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, it's massive. which doesn't need to be for any of the other normal traffic there.
Going to Easter Island, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm continuing to get some questions here.
Yeah, bring through.
I can keep asking questions. Let's see here. Yes, I did ask what the 4 towers were for. That's actually a joke. They're asking me a question about one of our running jokes on the show. But to make it relevant, was there any concern about lightning protection for the orbiters while they were being moved around? Because we always talk about, oh, what are the 4 towers for? And at the Cape, at the launch sites, LC-39A and stuff, it's for lightning protection, right?
Yep.
Was there any concern about lightning striking the orbiter when it was being moved around, outside of the protection of the lightning catenaries that were around the pads?
Yeah, absolutely. And so those mate demate devices that we saw, those had lightning protection built into them for that exact reason during normal processing. And so there was also concern for that there. So I believe that the mask could serve as some of that, but mainly our goal was to not do any of those operations if there was any chance that was going to happen, right? So to avoid that, we had stay within the facility until we had 3 days that we knew were going to be no chance of foul weather kind of thing. So it was more of avoidance more than anything. Whereas with the mate demate device, because we use that more often, it was be a longer period of time. You know, we could build that in because we knew we'd need that there. Yeah. So, but we just avoided that, and which, you know, in Florida it's hard to do sometimes. DC hard to do sometimes. California a little easier, but yeah.
Gosh, and you can actually see there's bits of the structure above the mate demate there that could be lightning protection. But the yellow 4 towers we were talking about were those stabilizers, the sideways stabilizers for the slings. And somebody's like, you know what the 4 towers are always for? And I'm like, different 4 towers. That's why they're yellow instead of white. Let's see here. Still getting some questions, y'all. If y'all have questions for us, tag us in chat. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Do we know, was there like a maximum range that you could go on the carrier aircraft, or did you have to like stop constantly because of all the extra drag from the shuttle?
So a couple things. So it all depended on fuel usage, and I'm not going to know the exact amounts and distances and so forth. But the other thing you had to consider was the weight at takeoff and the lift. So when we were, for instance, I'll think back to when we were still flying the space shuttles and we would be ferrying from California coming back to Florida. We would usually have to leave right as soon as the sun came up because the desert and the heat and the additional weight. So you'd have to get off the ground as soon as possible. And if you, for whatever reason, if you missed that window, you'd have to wait to the next morning. You couldn't just say, oh, let's just take a couple hours and then we'll try again. But that was all because of the weight of the vehicle and the landing strip itself. And then the stopping points would be how far can we go with the amount of fuel and the drag associated with the vehicle and so forth. Yeah,
I'll bring this photo up again because what people don't realize, or maybe do realize, but it doesn't really click, it's a 747 that it's on. It's not like a Cessna that you're trying to carry the shuttle with. In the 747 has all the cargo space down low, and you wouldn't fill that with tons of cargo like you would on a normal flight. In the top, where all the people normally sit, you didn't have people sitting in there. You didn't have even the seats and stuff like that, just a little bit of a couple seats up front. But the inside of the 747 was basically emptied out so that you didn't use that payload, you could actually carry the shuttle. So 747s carry a lot, I guess is the point. And if you're not carrying it on the inside, it sort of frees up some of that overhead to carry it on the outside. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And we didn't even... The crew was even minimal too. I don't remember the number of the flight crew, but I'm going to maybe no more than 7 people in that whole big 747. I mean, it wasn't even like you had folks that would, at one point in time, there's some discussion about, well, why don't you just fly your crew inside the 747? And for safety reasons, that just wasn't going to be the best idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that there were some external modifications, and not only just to hold it, but for it to be, safe flying with the airflow change.
That's right. Yep.
Shuttle on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest, most noticeable, it's same picture. Hey, I can use the same picture again. Is the additions to the vertical stabilizers on the tail. Like that's not a normal thing on your 747s that are out at the airport. And then of course it had to have the mount points. You could sort of see them right in there. It had those two bipod, tripod, whichever they are, sort of mount points for the shuttle to bolt onto. The orbiter to bolt onto. Oh my gosh, I'm trying so hard.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
No, I was curious because I also, once upon a time, I worked at Orbital Sciences, and we had a vehicle that we were going to do, but underneath captive carry. And when we did the flight testing to figure out what the airflow difference was, there was one flight where the back panel underneath the tail was like wobbling so much because of the change in the airflow pressure. And it was wild to see. So where's that aircraft now? Is it sort of still just kept because you never know what other big vehicles we're going to need to move around one day?
That's a good question. I don't know. Hopefully they're keeping at least one. I think the plan was to, but I don't know. Somebody's probably online looking it up for me right now.
Right. Yeah. Let us know, chat.
They'll post it in chat. Trust me. Like somebody actually came over and let us know that the airport at Easter Island was once designated as a abort site for the space shuttle when polar orbital flights from Vandenberg in Southern California were planned. Like apparently that's why. Like people in chat are going and looking that up and putting the answer in chat while we're talking. So it's one of the reasons we do these shows live. Like that's not something that happens if you're just watching a video, right? It's literally, we're here, people are watching, we're asking real questions, I'm pulling them right out of chat and asking y'all, and that is why we do it the way we do it here.
I think White Sands was also an abort site at one point.
Oh yeah,
I learned from watching the movie Space Camp.
Yes.
From my historical documentary Space Camp. Like, okay, so sometimes I don't believe chat. Was this a real thing? Was there a sign on the back of the SEA that said attach orbiter here, black side down? Was that actually a thing?
I never saw that.
Okay.
I never saw that, so I can't confirm or deny. I never saw that.
I imagine maybe there's a photo out there that somebody posted up and somebody put like a little piece of paper on there that said that for the fun one.
Holding it up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right.
Upside down.
Tell them we want evidence. We want a picture. If they've got one, they got to send it in.
Let's see here. Here is a question. It's like picture it didn't happen, right? Now they're going to be sending me pics in my DMs apparently. This is sort of a joke, but was there ever a point when all the space shuttles were in one place? All the orbiters were in one place? Like everything we had was on one runway or at the Cape or something like that? Or was that something you tried to avoid?
I don't think so. I have a poster picture of on the, but I was always on the assumption it was a photoshopped type of thing that has them all together. So I think you could find a picture with them all together, but I can't imagine that we would have ever had them all lined up like on a runway like this picture that I'm referring to had. Now, we did have pictures, when we would swap orbiters between the orbiter processing facilities, there's been several times where we've had them like nose to nose. You all have seen the Enterprise Discovery nose to nose picture that we did during transport. So we've had times like that where we've had a couple together. We may have even had 3 that you could see together at the same time, but never like in a staged position as far as I'm aware.
Gotcha. I don't know if that's just like the way the logistics work out, or it's like, oh, not all your eggs in one basket sort of thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still launching it out of the Cape, so.
Well, yeah, and that, weather's a huge thing, right? As the flow director, I never wanted that vehicle to be outside of a facility unless it was meant to be there because we're getting ready to launch it, right? Because anytime you're outside, you're beholden to the weather and the elements. So, even when we had to do kind of shuffling between facilities, we would do it as quickly as possible and get the orbiter back in a safe environment.
Yeah, and you gave yourself lots of time. None of this like, oh, maybe we can rush through it and get it there before the thunderstorm hits. Like, you don't want to race Florida thunderstorms.
No, do not. So we took advantage of photo ops, but we would never have just done it just for a photo op. If that makes sense.
Gotcha, makes sense. And now I'm getting pictures linked and stuff like that. I think some of these actually look like they were done in like a flight simulator program or something, but I'm being told authoritatively 100% there is no photo of all the shuttles together in the same place. Like, didn't happen, is what I'm getting in the back channel here. Yeah.
I feel like if that happened, it would already be all over the internet.
Yeah.
Like, everybody would have that photo.
Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, CGI, great. Like, we have to deal with CGIers all the time. This one can confirm that's not legit.
No.
I don't even have them labeled. That is, it looks like it's from a flight simulator or something like that. So.
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know. Out of all the things, it's like, yeah, that one definitely CGI. Again, y'all, I'm getting questions. There's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of questions we've already covered a little bit, so I'm not trying to ask the same questions over and over again. Let's see here. Aha. Go ahead. Yeah, Summer, go.
Oh, well, no, because I don't want to totally change the subject, but I kind of wanted to ask Stephanie what she's up to these days. What's your day job?
So when I finished delivering all of the orbiters, I was kind of out of a job, not really, but I had been working Discovery and then worked towards retirement. So I thought about spending some time up at headquarters in DC on a temporary assignment just to see, how things worked from up here. And I really enjoyed being up here. And I started off working in the Office of the Chief Technologist on a detailed assignment there. And then I ended up with the Office of the Chief Information Officer, which is where I work now. So I oversee the Enterprise Program Project Management Office. And so on the IT side of NASA, I am responsible for ensuring that we have good policy and process in place for all of the IT projects that we execute to provide services to our missions so that they can accomplish their missions. And so maybe not quite as glamorous as my space shuttle job, but still really enjoy being a part of NASA and being a part of making the missions happen. And I really, really enjoy being in DC. It's different. I grew up in Florida, very much like Florida, but I basically spent my whole life in Florida. So to be somewhere different, I enjoy that a lot as well. And so yeah, that's I do project management type of work for the IT side of the house. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's no small feat, given the amount of missions going on at NASA and all of the IT support that each one probably needs.
Yes.
Sounds pretty crucial.
There's a lot of work there, and especially with COVID and everybody going to remote, that obviously was a big turn on our IT world, right? So happy to say that we're doing our best to keep up. There's always things we can continue to make better, and we're doing that the fastest we can.
Do you have a favorite NASA mission outside of the Space Shuttle program?
Oh, outside of the Space Shuttle program. Well, I worked station as well before I worked shuttle. So I have a fond place in my heart for station, especially the U.S. lab. I spent a lot of time working on the U.S. lab. And then before that was Space Lab, which you can see components from Space Lab at Smithsonian. So that's neat to go back and see there. Obviously, I'm very excited about putting boots back on the moon. And so Artemis is going to be wonderful, especially with a female being on the moon. So looking forward to that. So that, there's not much at NASA that you can't get excited about and be proud about. So it's like every time you turn around and look at James Webb and all the great discoveries we've just had here. So yeah, so many great things that we're doing.
Yeah, next month for this program, we're going to be talking about JWST.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Have you changed your desktop background yet?
What's that?
Have you changed your desktop background yet?
You can't use the Hubble Ultra Deep Field anymore. It has to be the JWST one now. No, I was just going to say that actually, speaking of space telescopes, I went to the launch of the Hubble telescope, which was
wonderful,
incredible, and perfectly space shuttle payload bay sized.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of folks don't realize the payload bay could hold a Greyhound bus. That's probably the best way to explain to people how big it is, because until you see it, you don't really get an understanding about how much you could take up with the space shuttle and what a great cargo vehicle it was for those types of missions.
Yeah, that's what I was always taught, like a school bus or some bus, essentially.
Also, the size of the stripes on the flag on the flag on the VAB. Every time somebody mentions a bus, that's what I think of. I'm like, oh, did you know it's the size of a lane of traffic?
On the flag. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do this. I'm waiting to see if somebody has confirmed if it's legitimate or not. But somebody provided me this, and it is a shot that says, caution, place orbiter, I think here, black side down, lefty loosey, righty tighty. And it says that it's note the small rider on N905NA's aft orbiter support strut. It sounds very official. Nobody's confirmed for me if this is like a real photo or like one of those photoshopped alien things. But anyways, chat, discuss. Real or not real. Never saw this though, right, Stephanie?
No, we need to ask Dennis Jenkins. He's my guy to go to for anything space shuttle historical. He knows everything. So let's send it to Dennis and he'll figure it out for us.
Good deal. We'll get the authoritative answer on that from somebody who was there looking at that strut. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
It says lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. Go ahead, Summer. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask Stephanie if she had sort of a favorite stage of the turnaround for a shuttle, or sort of seeing what you did to it from when it landed to when it had to go next. Was there one of those processes that you thought was kind of the coolest or the most unique thing that that had to be done?
You're talking about during a normal processing flow when we were flying vehicles? Yeah. Really, for my team, the biggest milestone was rolling out of the orbiter processing facility, because as I started off saying, how the orbiter being the most complex part of the overall space shuttle, a lot of work happens to get to that point. So when you're able to say, okay, we've got everything finished on the orbiter that happens in the horizontal position versus the vertical, there's still work to be done. We're not done by any means, but that's a huge milestone. So there's always a good celebration for each of those. And then stepping back a little bit bigger in picture would be when we did that for return to flight. So after we'd had the Columbia accident, Discovery was the vehicle that was picked to be our return to flight vehicle. And you may not have known, but when we had the Columbia accident, Discovery was in what we called an orbiter maintenance down period. So every approximately 8 years, an orbiter would be taken offline and done very intense maintenance. So instead of the routine maintenance that we did every processing flow, it was basically a year-long processing flow of doing and pulling things out that you didn't normally pull out of the vehicle, inspecting things you weren't able to inspect without pulling something out, that kind of thing. And so we were in an orbiter maintenance down period when the accident happened. And so leadership had determined that it made the most sense for Discovery then to be the vehicle that we prepared for the first return to flight after Columbia. So completing that work. So not only did we have to finish just the work that we knew about, then we also had the different upgrades and modifications and things that came out of the investigation that were going to help us make the orbiter stronger, make sure that we had more visibility into different systems, that kind of thing. And so there was a lot of additional work that got piled into the processing flow. And so once we were able to say we had gotten all that done and we were ready to roll out of the orbiter processing facility to get mated to the booster and the boosters in the tank, that was a huge deal, a really exciting time.
Oh yeah, I can see that. That's a huge accomplishment. Just knowing that you've done everything you can, and then you've put all these other new systems in place. And
I'll tell you another great memory and feeling was one of the many perks of being a flow director is that when Discovery landed at Kennedy, I would get to be out on the runway to see it land and to also greet the crew when they disembarked from the orbiter, which is, as you can imagine, just a very, very emotional and awesome experience. And after the very last mission, several members of the crew had said, you know what, I just want to let you know, we are so grateful that Discovery operated so well. We didn't have to focus on anything other than doing our job and enjoying our last time on this flight. Whereas if there had been problems, and obviously that would have taken them time to help us troubleshoot and all that. And so to hear from them how grateful they were that my team did such an excellent job right up until the very end to make sure Discovery was going to be there and support the way it needed to allow that mission to be successful was truly amazing.
Yeah, that's huge. That's such a great thing to hear. I'm sure that it was a good vehicle and it always did its job.
Yes.
Thanks to you.
She was known as the workhorse. Yes.
Yeah.
I know y'all can see, like the people on the Zoom call, Stephanie and Summer, can see my face and see me making funny, like, brow question marks here. There are a lot of photos of that sign that's supposedly on the thing. There are a lot of photos on the internet
Okay.
Could be.
In different situations, even like backed out and then you zoom in and it's there. It seems like it's the sort of thing where, I mean, it's in this photo right here. If I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it's in there. Yeah, there we go. You can see some writing there that seems to say that. So apparently maybe, unless either somebody was like really prolifically just dedicated to this gag of photoshopping every picture of this thing to say that, or it was actually a thing.
Could have been.
Can you go back a photo?
Oh,
You
yeah,
had
yeah,
a
of course.
photo of the, there, yeah, with no tail.
Oh.
On the plane.
Oh, yeah, or wings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. And a lift, of course. I bet you that's a United Airlines lift. Yeah. That's funny that they move these space shuttles around completely intact, but the plane that actually moved the space shuttles around, they took apart. It's probably for storage or moving it down the road or something like that.
Putting it on a train, maybe.
There you go.
Nice and narrow.
Let's see here. Here's a good question. Do we know of any pieces that were used in space shuttle processing that went on to have future careers doing other non-shuttle things? So I guess one big example I know of that, I didn't prepare the image first, but is the transporter, the OTS, I think it was. The
Overland transporter?
Yeah.
Transport system?
Yep.
Or the OTS would be the orbiter transport system. Yeah.
So I guess the question is this the OTS? Let's see here. That's a super close-up picture of it, but that is a cab with a bunch of wheels behind it. I'm trying to see. I don't know if I have one of those with the... Yeah, here we go. Endeavour OTS. There we go. I found it. All right. So there is Endeavour on... That's the OTS, correct?
Correct. Yes.
The orbiter transport system?
System.
Okay. So anyway,
I believe so.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
To tie that up, we know that piece of equipment went on to a future life of moving SpaceX boosters around. It's the same thing. It's been repainted and it's got a SpaceX logo on it. But I know that NASA, air quotes, sold, right, that to SpaceX to move their rockets around. Are there any other pieces that were used for the shuttle program that found new life in other endeavors, I guess you could say?
Well, the crawlers are still being used. So those are being used. So that's a big one. So we have the crawlers that will transport the new vehicle out just like it did for Apollo and then for the shuttle, and now we're reusing them again. So that's a big example there. And there's probably more. I can't think of too many more off the top of my head, but we definitely are all about reuse where we can, because things obviously are very expensive. We don't want to go spend money if we can reuse what we have. And you see that in the space shuttle program from Apollo, right? When you look at the vehicle assembly building, that big tall building with the flag, it was built for the Apollo program and then modified to support shuttle. And now it's been modified again to support the next vehicle. So, we continue to do that to make use of those things and hopefully, save money and not have to go to spend the money on something new if we can reuse what we have.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of it also is not just physical equipment, like you think of a transporter or a crane or something like that, but the knowledge that we gained during the shuttle program being reused for future reusable space programs.
What about the orbital processing facility? What's happened to that?
Those are being reused as well. Yes. So I know one of them was being used by Boeing for the Orion, and the other two are being used as well. I'm not sure right now which specifically they're being used for. I think one might be SpaceX, I think. But yes, they're being reused as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know something I think I actually have? Is this the orbiter? OPF would be the orbiter processing facility, right?
Yes.
This would be a shuttle with the OBF in the background, correct?
That's correct. Yep, that's either coming in or going out of the OPF. That's correct.
Yeah, that's Atlantis. It just says move, I guess, to VAB, 17th October 2012. When I asked if we had any behind-the-scenes stuff of shuttle orbiters being moved around, and I asked sort of the NASA Spaceflight Level 2 folks, I got a deluge of behind the scenes stuff like this. So this is actually something that one of our writers, Philip Sloss, took in 2012 when he was reporting on the space shuttle, and it doesn't exist anywhere on the internet except in Level 2, our NASA spaceflight sort of behind the scenes archive that's just reams and reams of stuff like this. It's just the shuttle rolling out. So you said OPF, and I was like, I know I saw OPF in a file somewhere. Let me see, and I found it right here. There are actually 9 video files here that they sent me. So
the OPF, I always liken it to being a garage for a car, because it's really the garage for the orbiter. And Des, I sent you some pictures where you can even see like all the scaffolding and platforms that snug right up to it. There have been many times where I've taken folks on a tour of the OPF and walk in, and the orbiter is raised up off the ground as well, and you can walk underneath it there, and we need to do work. And I'll be in the middle of giving my little spiel, and somebody will say, well, when are we going to get to see Discovery? And I'm like, you're standing right underneath it. But that's because it's so enclosed.
Thing.
Yeah, right. But we have so much scaffolding and platforms built right up snug next to it that they just were caught off guard. They were expecting to see it like in an open hangar, and it's like, oh, no, we're working on it, so we've got to have good close access to it.
Is that like one of these, Stephanie? It's not labeled OPF, but
that's one of them for sure. There was one of the nose landing gear, and then one of the forward reaction control system compartment.
There you go.
There you go. There's one.
Oh.
So you can see it's jacked up. Those yellow things are jacks. And so that's how we jack the orbiter up. We call it jack and level, because that's exactly what it does. It's at level, because remember, when it's on its wheels, it's nose down. And so this levels it up. And then you can see the white platforms all around the edges there that are right up close within inches to the side of the orbiter itself.
I guess there's sort of, it's not daylight because it's still inside the facility, but all the way around right here, you can see where the platform ends and the orbiter begins, and it's got that little gap in between, but you can get right up on it to inspect it, look at it, work on it, whatever you need to do. Gotcha. And then I have to go back to this one again because we're talking about the NASA humor here, and you can see that this is clearly labeled aft. It's the part with the engines. It's the flamey bit pointing backwards on the orbiter there. So just so you didn't put it in there backwards or anything.
And you can tell that one is the nozzles on a stick, because you don't have the big engine itself. You just see the nozzle.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it literally just ends. There should be turbo pumps and all sorts of other stuff in there, and it's literally just the nozzle on a stick.
My favorite.
We didn't talk about the. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Summer.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I love the part of the building where it's cut out for the tail.
Yeah. Another part of the processing, especially for the retirement of the vehicles, was those orbiter maneuvering system pods in the back of the vehicle, right next to the engine compartment. Those always come off anyway. I shouldn't say always, those came off to be refurbished, and they were sent to another facility where we can do that refurbishment on at Kennedy. But then they also were sent to the White Sands test facility to do the very thorough decommissioning of those OMS pods and the forward reaction control system. So that was something different for retirement that didn't normally happen. So we had to ship, part of the process was to take those off the vehicle, ship them out to White Sands, let them do all that very hazardous work of safetying those pods and then bringing them back. So yeah, in this picture, you see the pods are missing in the back, and then the forward reaction control system is missing as well. And we just have it kind of covered to try to protect that area as they're moving it between the buildings.
Yeah, I knew I had seen that in there. This is such a problem for me because there's so many awesome photos. Every time we say something, I'm like, I know I saw it. Let me go find where it is. Yeah. And you can see me squinting over here at the other monitor trying to find the photos.
You're doing great. You're doing great. And the yellow on the top there is the strong backs for the payload bay doors. So when you're on the Earth, you're not obviously in microgravity. And so the mechanisms that open the payload bay doors in space are not strong enough to do that with gravity. Right. So those are strong backs that allow us to then use hoists to manually open those payload bay doors inside the orbiter processing facilities. That's one of the first things we do is get those strong backs installed so we can open the payload bay doors.
Gotcha, because they're sort of designed for microgravity, right? On orbit, when the space shuttle opens up its own doors, but on Earth, where it's, I guess I could say weak, right? It's gravity pulling it down. It's a lot more weight, I guess, in those doors. You help them open, I guess, huh?
Yep. We have to have such a larger component if we were going to do it, on the ground than we would need in space. So why would we build it if we're not going to have to open them on the ground, except for when we can, we do open on the ground, obviously, but we can assist it. We don't need to have the mechanism that's part of the flight vehicle do that for us.
Right.
Makes sense. All right. I'm continuing to look through images here, but I've also just glanced at the clock, and it looks like we may be out of time for the shows. Oh, well, yeah, here you go. Just really quickly, here's a... Oops, yes, I just switched out when I didn't mean to. There's a removed dome spot, so...
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I was looking for that because I was like, I thought I saw something that looked like that in there, but we have come up to what should be the end of our show here today. Whew. That's a lot of cool pictures to look at. And Stephanie, you have so much knowledge about everything that sort of like went on in the behind the scenes. We always love the stories, right? Like, it's not like, oh, exactly how much did that weigh? Like, okay, cool. It's like, oh yeah, this one time we moved it and we did this. And it's so great to have you on the show and to have you share not just the technicalities of how everything worked, but, well, yeah, we had to winch it over this way and that sort of thing. It's just so amazing. Those are the sort of stories that don't exist in a technical manual anywhere like that. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure.
That's great. Thank you for letting me, talk about this again. I always want to talk about Discovery and the other orbiters and all the fun times we had there. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And y'all, like I said, we're looking at all the deep dives here, looking at all the pictures, like exactly how different things sort of worked in different ways and things. And we never have time to get through the entire show. Everybody's like, oh, an hour and a half, we're going to run out of stuff to talk about. And we never run out of stuff to talk about. Y'all know it. We've answered so many good questions. I know that there's questions that I couldn't get to. There were tons of questions that came through, and we had either sort of talked about it a little bit or we just didn't have time to get to them. So if you did ask a question, please know I wasn't trying to ignore your question. No such things as a dumb question, especially when we're learning about things like the shuttle program, the orbiters, all this stuff with somebody who knows. I'm pointing this way today. Somebody who knows, who was there for that stuff. So I didn't mean to miss any questions. We just always run out of time. I do have one last question before we can let you go, though, Stephanie.
I know this one.
Did you know this one? Okay, Summer's been on.
I know what's coming.
Summer knows what's coming. We didn't talk about this in the pre-show or anything like that, but the question for you, Stephanie: worm or meatball?
Ooh.
Just on the spot at the end of the show. It's like a rite of passage.
I know. And I was there during the transition, so that's both transitions.
Ah.
So, I'm gonna go with meatball.
Meatball. Okay.
Yep.
The new logo. Yep. Which is like you like.
Well, no, not really.
Oh,
not
okay.
Really. It was old and
the original.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It was meatball, then worm, and then meatball. So
right. Yeah. You just like the technical design of it. You like the patterns on it.
The history, I think the history of it, yeah.
Okay, cool. There's no wrong answer to that question. Like, half of the people watching will tell you you're wrong, and half will be in love with you because you agree with them. And then half of them will forget this happened, and half of them will clip this little piece of video and say, that's the right answer. So
I say we just use both. Why can't we just always use both?
Why not both? I like it. I like it. Well, Stephanie, we've kept you a couple minutes over here. We always tend to run over. We always have such a good time on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend here to talk to us about your experiences and stuff like that. Again, y'all, Stephanie Stilson, NASA. I'm just going to say NASA because you've done so many cool things for NASA. But thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much.
All right. And also, y'all have seen Summer Ash before. Summer, thank you so much for sharing the show with us today. We always have a pleasure here with you hanging out.
Thanks for letting me geek out and ask Stephanie all my favorite questions.
Absolutely. And one more time, y'all, just remember the shows don't happen. The shows are made possible because Virtual Astronomy Live is supported through a NASA cooperative agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. I'm going to scroll down in my little document here and see if we have information about next month's show. Oh, we do. It's highlighted in yellow. That means I'm supposed to say it. Next Virtual Astronomy Live is happening Sunday, August 21st. And we're going to be talking the first science images that came back from James Webb Space Telescopes with some of the scientists on the project. So if you want to sign up for a reminder on that, you can go to intrepidmuseum.org. Summer, I assume that will be a topic that you're interested in.
Very much so.
Very
yes.
much so. Excellent. So that is coming up next month. We do hope we see you there. But for now, a couple minutes over, that is going to be the end of today's Virtual Astronomy Live. Remember, Intrepid Museum, NASA Spaceflight, wherever you're watching, whatever your channel you're on, make sure you click the little like button or whatever you're supposed to do. You know how to find a channel if you want to get back to it. And if this is the sort of content you like hearing from people with experience, expertise like Stephanie here, make sure you like and subscribe or whatever the kids are doing these days. You know how the internet works. But for now, that is going to be the end of our show. We're all going to do the weird thing where we all wave at you and say goodbye, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks so much for joining us. Later, nerds. That's always what we say is later, nerds. I'm a nerd. I'm okay with it. I own it. We'll see y'all later.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
The chamber pressure looks good. Throttling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight down SC off. Bring in SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.